Assalamualaikum and very good day to everyone. We are from Group 1 and for today's presentation, we will discussing the topic that titled Colonialism, Neocolonialism and Decolonizations. So now I will start our presentation with introducing our group members, which is me, Nur Aliana Suha, the second presenter, Wardina, the third presenter, Nur Aida Nabila, next, Anisha Dalila, and the last one is Sarifah Zarid Sofia. So now I will continue our presentation with introductions. But before that, when you hear the word colonialism, what's come to your minds? Is it European ships? Or maybe foreign flags? Or maybe lost freedoms? But the truth is, neocolonialism, colonialism and decolonization are not just events of the past, but they are a part of long and ongoing story. Colonialism began in the 5th century when the European power like Britain, Spain and France took control of the land across Asia, Africa and America. This power exploited resources and erased local culture, leaving behind long-lasting impacts. Even after independence, many countries faced neocolonialism, where the control continued through economic pressure and global influence. That's why decolonization is not just a political freedom, but it means a reclaiming identity, culture, independent from the foreign control. With that, let's move on to the argumentation of our presentation, which will be presented by our second presenter, Wardina.
Next, I will explain about argument. First is colonialism. Although it was exploitative, colonialism introduced modern institutions and infrastructure to colonize territories. Colonial power brought legal systems, centralized governance, and built railways and ports to extract resources. They also create education system to train workers for administration. A good example is British rule India. The British set up a civil service, parliamentary government, and railway network after independence in 1947. India kept many of these systems and adapted them to fit its own democratic values. This shows how colonial legacies still shape post-colonial development today. The second point is neocolonialism. This is a modern form of control where powerful nations and global institutions influence weaker countries economically, not politically. Instead of using military force, they use loans, trade, and financial system to maintain influence. For example, France's influence over its former African colonies through the CFA France currency. This currency is linked to the euro, and African countries must keep large part of their reserve in the French treasury. Though this system is meant to bring stability, it limits economic freedom and prevents real independence. The final argument is decolonization. Decolonization is the process where colonized nations regain their political independence and cultural identity. This often included reviving local language, custom, and governance that had been erased under colonial rule. A clear example is Indonesia's independence from the Dutch in 1945. After centuries of control, Indonesia promoted its own language, which is Bahasa Indonesia, and supported national development. Decolonization gave countries the chance to shape their own future based on their history, culture, and needs.
Thank you, Wardina. Next, I will continue with the theory used in colonialism, neocolonialism, and decolonization. Firstly, the theory used in colonialism is modernization theory. Modernization theory is an early Western idea that say colonial power such as Britain and France help modernize countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America by building roads, school, and government system. These places were seen as traditional because they depended on farming and old ways of life. However, many people critique this theory because it ignores how colonialism often harmed local people. For example, in India, the British built railway and school, but mainly to take resources and spread their own culture, not to help the people there. Critics says the theory hides the truth about how colonialism caused poverty, land loss, cultural damage, and violence. Secondly, the theory used in neocolonialism is dependency theory. Neocolonialism is a modern form of control where rich countries influence weaker ones through money and politics even after they become independent. Dependency theory explains that rich countries stay wealthy by taking advantage of poor countries and keeping them dependent. For example, many African countries like Ghana and Nigeria still depend on loans from the IMF and World Bank, but these loans often come with strict rules that harm local people and help foraging companies take over. Poor countries usually exploit cheap raw material, while rich countries sell expensive products, creating unfair trade. Malaysia also faced neo-colonialism because we really on trade with powerful countries such as China and the United States and foraging investment which make us vulnerable to outside pressure and debt. Lastly, theory used in decolonization is post-colonial theory. Decolonization means removing the effect of colonialism from a country's politics, culture, education, and identity. Post-colonial theory explains how former colonies try to take back their culture, pride, and voice after being controlled for a long time. Thinkers such as Edward Said and Frank Fanon said colonizers made local people feel weak and ashamed of their own culture. Decolonization includes using local language, teaching local history, and bringing back traditional culture. For example, India used Hindi more after independence and Algeria promote Arab Berber culture. In Malaysia, we still use systems from British rule like in law and education, and English is still used a lot. Effort to promote Bahasa Melayu talk about local heroes like Tok Janggut and Mat Kidau and focus on local language are part of decolonization. But it takes time and strong leader to stop thinking that Western ways are always better.
Thank you, Aida. Now I will explain the methodology used in our topic. Our group used qualitative method to study how colonialism still affect countries today and how they are facing neocolonialism and decolonization. We base our study on three theories, which is post-colonial theory, dependency theory, and modernization theory. This helps us understand the political, economic, and cultural condition in post-colonial countries. Next, we use comparative case study design where we look at different countries that were colonized and compare how they developed after independence. This helps us to see how colonial past still influence the present. For theoretical framework, we use three main theories. First, modernization theory. We look at how countries follow or reject Western development. Second, dependency theory explain on how many post-colonial countries still dependent on a rich nation. And lastly, post-colonial theory shows how colonial ideas still remain in education, media, and government. Next, we collect data from primary and secondary sources like government policy, development plans, World Bank report, public speech, advertisement, and academic research.
This helped us study neocolonialism and decolonization in politics, economy, and culture. For data analysis, we use two methods. First, content analysis, and second, discourse analysis. We compare findings across different countries. For ethical consideration, we did research with respect and care. We tried to avoid colonial bias and stay aware of our own position as researchers. Lastly, the limitation of the study is context-specific, so it can't be applied to everywhere. But overall, it still gives good insight. That's all from me. Next, I will pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, presenter. So now we move to the next part, which is the findings and discussions. So this section discusses how colonialism, neocolonialism, and decolonization continue to influence post-colonial countries. By using different theories and real-world examples, the findings show that even after gaining independence, many countries will struggle with the effects of colonial rule, whether through inherited systems, economic independence, or cultural identity issues. So the main point is the colonial legacies and institutional continuities. One key finding is that many post-colonial countries still use the systems created during colonial rule. For example, in India, the British introduced things like legal systems, civil service, and railways, which are still used today. These structures helped the country function, but they were originally made to benefit colonial powers, not local people. The modernization theory says colonialism helped develop countries, but this view is criticized because it ignores how the system were put mainly to exploit local resources. So the next point is neocolonialism and academic dependency. Even after gaining independence, many countries are still not fully in control of their economy. So this is called neocolonialism. Developing countries often take loans from the IMF or World Bank, but the conditions attached to these loans usually benefit rich countries more. For example, African countries using the CFA francs must follow French economic rules. This shows how poor countries are still dependent on richer ones. This supports dependency theory, which says that global systems are built to keep poor countries poor and rich countries rich. So next, the third point is decolonization and cultural identity reconstruction. Decolonization is not just about gaining independence, but also about rebuilding culture and identity. Many countries try to revive their native language and traditions after years of being suppressed by colonial powers. For instance, Indonesia promoted the use of Bahasa Indonesia after independence. Post-colonial thinkers like Fanon and said that colonialism also damaged people's self-image, so real decolonization must involve psychological and cultural recovery, not just political change. So the fourth point is continuing challenges and resistance. The effects of colonialism can still be seen today in many systems. In Malaysia, for example, English is still widely used in education and law, and colonial history still influence national narratives. These colonial leftovers make it hard for countries to fully embrace their own identity. Decolonization is not a one-time event but a long process. It involves rethinking the economy, the education system, and how a country sees itself using its own culture and values. So in conclusion, colonialism, neocolonialism, and decolonization are still connected. Even though countries may be independent, they still face problems rooted in their colonial past. Real freedom is not just about political control, it includes economic justice, cultural pride, and mental liberation. Using theories like modernization, dependency, and post-colonial theory help us understand why these issues are still important today.
Thank you, Zaria Sofia, for the clear explanation on finding and discussions. So now I will conclude our presentation by summarizing the key point that we have discussed. In conclusion, colonialism, neocolonialism, and decolonization are still relevant for today. While colonialism involved direct control, neocolonialism used economic and political influence. Real decolonization means more than independence. It is about reclaiming identity and achieving true freedoms. So that's all from us. Thank you for lending your ears.